In my home state of Colorado, out-of-touch Denver and Boulder leftists voted to reintroduce gray wolves. Since then, 10 wolves were reintroduced in December, and 8 have confirmed wolf livestock depredations and 6 separate incidents involving wolf attacks in Colorado just this month. My Trust the Science Act delists the gray wolf from the federal endangered species lists and returns the issue of the wolf management to states and tribal wildlife agencies.
Once again, Republican leadership has taken an opportunity to vilify an endangered species today here on this floor, to sacrifice it to their precious industry groups. Guns, oil, and polluters. That has come to be what the GOP stands for, at least in this Congress. Last summer, they rushed to the House floor with bills to increase the extinction risk of the lesser prairie chicken and the northern long-eared bat. Today, it is the iconic gray wolf. Do my Republican friends truly have nothing better to do with their time, with the time of this body? We should be working on issues that make a difference to everyday life in America. But this Congress has been mostly about Republicans fighting with each other in a circular firing squad, and the only time they seem to take a break from that is when they want to do something to enrich the wealthiest Americans, harm the environment, or now to kill wolves.
In 2009, the Obama administration upheld the decision to delist gray wolves when their Interior Secretary, Ken Salazar, a Democrat from Colorado, announced the decision at a press conference that the Fish and Wildlife Service decision to delist gray wolves was a, quote, a supportable one. Scientists have concluded that recovery has occurred, end quote. In 2011, Congress directed USFWS to reinstate a rule to delist the gray wolf in the northern Rockies ecosystem. In 2013, the Obama administration proposed delisting gray wolves in the lower 48 states. In November of 2020, scientists and nonpartisan career employees at the Department of Interior once again found gray wolves were fully recovered and once again issued a rule that returned management of gray wolf populations to state and tribal wildlife agencies. Unfortunately, frivolous litigation was filed by the Defenders of Wildlife, Wild Earth Guardians, and other extremist groups, and an activist California judge subsequently pandered to these groups by vacating the 2020 rule and ultimately relisting the gray wolf by judicial fiat. State and tribal wildlife agencies have a proven record of successfully managing gray wolves. In fact, Montana's successful state management resulted in gray wolves being 500% above Fish and Wildlife Service recovery goals. Idaho's successful state management resulted in gray wolves being 700% above recovery goals. There are now, as estimated, up to 6,000 wolves in the lower 48. Furthermore, there are an estimated 7,000 to 11,000 gray wolves in Alaska, and there are an estimated 30,000 gray wolves in Canada. Again, an endangered species list success story. Let's do as my bill says, trust the bipartisan science, and pass this bill so we can finally delist the fully recovered gray wolf and focus scarce taxpayer funding on endangered species that actually need help being recovered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield.
This bill is falsely named. It's called the Trust the Science Act. And it would legislatively delist the gray wolf in the Endangered Species Act in the lower 48. That is not something that is done based on science. It is something this bill would do by political fiat. The gray wolf is one of America's most iconic species. And while it is making a comeback, the science and the facts on the ground tell us that it still needs help. This bill would make it so that not a single gray wolf in the United States, in the entire country, would be protected by the Endangered Species Act. Yes, it is true that the Yellowstone the National Park wolf reintroduction is one of the great success stories of the ESA. We saw that as apex predators, wolves help to rebalance and revitalize vibrant ecosystems and flourishing wildlife populations in one of the crown jewels of our national park system. The ESA has kept the wolf from going extinct. We've gone from only several hundred wild wolves in America, and these were inhabiting northern parts of Michigan and Minnesota, to approximately 7,500 wolves today, with populations in at least 11 states. That is the ESA in action. It's a great success story, but that doesn't mean that we can just unfurl a banner and declare mission accomplished. And certainly not when folks who took wolves to the brink of extinction are ready to rev up the wolf-killing machine once again and put us right back on that path to extinction. Wolf numbers have grown in the western United States, but the ESA rightly requires more than just population counts for delisting. Otherwise, we can quickly devolve right back to where we started. There are still a lot of factors that go into species recovery: habitat destruction, disease, the regulatory and recovery efforts by states that would have to take over management of the species if it is delisted, and a lot more. So the ESA requires that the Fish and Wildlife Service use the best available science to assess all of this, not just population numbers, before they make any delisting decisions. And importantly, the Fish and Wildlife Service must consult with tribes. Right now, the service is following these processes and developing a recovery plan. But if this bill was signed into law, all of that would be skipped. They would have to ignore any scientific evidence of remaining threats to the wolf. And this is the danger of legislatively delisting a species. While I believe my colleagues are capable of going onto Google and pulling up some population numbers on gray wolves, it is pretty brazen to suggest that they, as members of Congress, are more qualified than the scientists and experts with years of training to determine if a species is actually recovered. The ultimate goal of the ESA is to recover species and then set them up for success post-recovery. We need durable, not temporary outcomes. Passing this bill would simply call wolves recovered, but that does not make it so. The bill ignores science, and it sets a species back down the path to extinction by reinstating a Trump-era delisting rule that the courts have overturned because it violated the Endangered Species Act as well as the Administrative Procedure Act. This bill ignores the careful analysis of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service over the past year. It ignores the fact that although wolf populations are doing well in some places, they haven't met recovery goals in others. It does nothing to require federal consultation with tribes. And on top of that, there's nothing in the bill to push states to improve their conservation measures for wolves. When wolves were delisted in 2011 and 2021, some states raced to approve the killing of significant portions of their wolf populations, even using harvest quotas. States in the northern Rockies actually incentivized hunting. They paid hunters to kill wolves. Now, this does not demonstrate a commitment to conserving the species once it's delisted. All of these state policies would simply further villainize wolves and reward the type of killing that caused the population to crash in the first place. So no, a simple head count is not a scientifically sound basis for declaring open season on the gray wolf. My Republican colleagues know that what they're trying to do will never stand up to scrutiny in the courts. It would never stand up to consideration of the best available scientific and commercial data, and that's why this bill prohibits judicial review. And that really gives the game away. If you really trust the science, then you shouldn't be afraid of a little scrutiny. Based on the talking points that we've heard throughout this legislative process, this is all just so people can shoot more wolves. Why would Congress invest millions of taxpayer dollars in recovering this iconic species just to turn around and let states start killing them all over again? We'll hear a lot in debate today about how these apex predators, which are vital to our ecosystems, are scary, cold killers. That is ancient ignorance, not science. If we're lucky, we may even hear some of the wild conspiracy theories that we've heard in previous debates about larger, faster, more aggressive Canadian gray wolves. We've heard practically everything except the claim that these Canadian wolves have laser eyes. Look, Congress shouldn't be overriding conservation decisions made by scientists. Fortunately, we have this type of extreme, baseless language. We heard it a few years ago as dozens of Republicans made these claims during debate. I urge my colleagues and fellow conservationists to actually trust science, to vote no on this Trust the Ignorance Act. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.